So we're gonna cover chapter 6 today. This class we're 1 unit behind because of the holidays. So let's download the notes and the assignments and we'll go through those together. Okay, so in this week, we're gonna talk a little bit about threat actors, what is considered a threat, and how you prevent some of the threats. And in the perspective of the attacker, what are they looking for? What kind of things are they going to be doing, or what kind of tools are they going to be using? Today, we're going to do a lab using Kali Linux, and we're going to do a little bit of Tor browser, and so that way you can see how Tor browser is being used, especially for accessing the dark web, and then use some of the security tools. And hopefully, that might be in the area of interest that you are looking into ethical hacking, and that can lead into taking additional classes so you can learn how to be an ethical hacker. So the beginning of chapter 6 talk about open source intelligence. So basically all of this information can be available on their websites, right? Via the internet, on social media. So it is freely available. It's not proprietary information. So open source intelligence can provide tools and resources in the gathering information area. And that's really important for ethical hacking and pen testing, is to obtain information that's available out there. So within that, we need to talk about different type of threat actors, okay? So you often see that the categories for the hackers are broken down into different areas. Hacker is just someone that's proficient in technology or in a certain system and wants to share that knowledge with someone. I'm sure that because of the social media, you guys probably see video of different type of hacks, right? It's just more of a proficient way to do certain things. But in cybersecurity, hacker would entail different groups. You got the white hat hackers, and some of you are looking to do that, right? Those are the pen tester. We do this so that way we can find issues or problems with the system and be able to improve our security. So white hat hackers are the ones that are evaluating the network, right? Defending the network and being able to find some of the problems on the network. The black hat hackers are the ones that use the tools to circumvent the network illegally, right? Based on the computer abuse law, that anytime that one would circumvent the network or a system without approval or authorization, that will be considered computer abuse. So for the black hat hackers, they would be the ones that are circumventing systems or network, right, in an unauthorized manner. And normally black hat hackers have malicious intent, stealing data, right, corrupting the system, planting malware, things like that, right? And then you have the gray hat hackers. They don't have a true malicious intention or benevolent intent. So they kind of operate in between. So sometimes, right, there might be something that would be performed illegally, and then sometimes they don't have any kind of malicious intention. So the gray hats are kind of in between. Then you got the green hats, and this is more of a newer term for noobs. So they strive to be a full-blown hacker, and they're seeking information. In my opinion, they are more dangerous because they don't understand the consequences. So the kids that are downloading virus code and then testing it on local systems, or they are curious and they're trying to use online tools to be able to do that, very much like Script Kiddie. So the green hats, they want to be better attackers, and sometimes they would just learn from YouTube or looking up some tutorial websites and be able to do that, right? But with that, we have to really understand what is ethical and what is unethical and when that line is crossed. Then you got the red hat hackers. These are more of the bug bounty or the bug hunter. They would be able to defeat malicious attackers. Sometimes they do attack back, and that's their role. Normally, ethical hackers, we don't attack back. So in the system, in the case where you're facing attack, a lot of the time you are containing attack. It is not ethical to attack someone, right, when they're performing an attack on you. That becomes unethical. So based on the practice of ethical hacking, we don't attack back, right? We would contain. And then the red hat hackers, they are hired just to do that, to either attack back or to defeat a certain type of attack and do some reporting. So they operate a little bit higher than the white hat attackers. And then your blue hat is no desire to learn, but attempt to attack enemies very close to the script kiddies. So they are targeting mostly enemies, or they have specific target. The script kiddies are the ones that are just lack of expertise. They might get free tools from somewhere. They might try to brute force password. A lot of the times not knowing the consequences kind of also fall into some category of the green hat. So what you see tends to, they tend to be more dangerous because they would take higher risk. So hacktivists, group like Anonymous, you would see that they are hacktivists. They would do it for a political cause or some kind of cause. They would have a way to increase awareness in certain area, and then let the world know that they could, and just to show there is a cause in the attempt of the attack or the attack. So in the first few questions, we can go through and we can answer some of the questions here. The first question asks you, what's the difference between the white hat and the black hat attacker? And that's very simple. The black hat has malicious intentions, and they would use tools to circumvent the network illegally for that intention. The white hat hacker, usually referred to as pen tester, that will fall under the category of the white hat hacker because they would use pen testing techniques and the tools to assess system and network. But the true, right, main difference between the white and the black hat is that the white hat hacker provides the report after the assessment to the organization, right? To show what would be the security gap or the weakness of the network. And so the white hat hacker would ethically perform the techniques and provide the report to the organization. So based on the list, we can see that threats can have different groups or different types of actors. We have different category of hackers like green, white, red hat hackers. Then you also have insider threats. Those are the people who are within the organization that can potentially cause harm, unintentionally and intentionally. So sometime through a mistake that the insider threat would leak data. Sometimes it could be that through the intention that they didn't get the raise or they didn't get the promotion or recognition that they deserve, and they felt like they need to do something malicious. Sometimes they are knowledgeable in the technical area. For most cases, that would be the group of people that would be knowledgeable in technical skills. So insider threats are difficult to detect, right? And people can change over time, right? Through different factors and different impact. And then you got the hacktivists, those are doing it for the cause. And then you can have script kiddies. So you can pick any of the two. Just make sure you know them for Security Plus certification and other certifications, right? We would know at least two. Now, when you look at security news or updates or even search online, you often see the term advanced persistent threat, your APT, right? We love acronyms, so APT is advanced persistent threat. And these are groups, and it could be all around the world, right? Not just in United States. They have specific targets and networks that they aim for. A lot of the times they are sponsored by nation state or government. So whenever that you hear the term APT, they are a little bit more advanced than your normal attackers, right? They would be a group of attackers that would have specific targets, like attacking utility centers, water, gas, electricity, or they would attack a certain nation. So a lot of the things that we would often see that would be based on cybercrime or cyber warfare, you often see the APT would come up. The bigger attack, like what you've seen with Caesar Palace recently, right? There was APT that was named. It was a mix. So there was rumors that some group was more involved than the other. So you often see, and that list is gonna grow, right? Right now, I think we're like roughly 200. But you know, you would see the NSA and FBI, they track these things. So on Wikipedia, if you just type in APT or Advanced Persistent Threat, you would see a listing of them. So APT, they would fall under organized crime, and sometimes organized crime encompasses APT. A lot of the things that you do, because the intention or the motivation tends to be financial gains, or the data that would lead to financial gains. Okay. Now, when it is nation state sponsored or government sponsored, they are called state actors. And that means that they would target specific government, agency, organization, different areas of different nation. Sometimes they would look into nuclear. Sometimes it would be, you know, could be aerospace and different industry that's impacted by advanced persistent threat. Okay. So the example that I put here, for example, like China, this is APT1, and they have specific name, right? And then they have different APT label, but they have their group name. So if you're looking at China alone, there are quite a few APT that comes out of China, like Double Dragon or People's Liberation Army. They are very popular inside China. And they operate over 1,000+ servers. Okay. So some of that is malware related. Some of it would be, you know, identity theft related. So there could be different intention. Another country that we would see a lot of dangerous or highly advanced group of attackers or APT is Russia or Ukraine. Okay. So Fancy Bear is a common one, Cozy Bear. So I named some of the ones that you see here as example from Russia, right? And then you got different country like Iran, Iraq, or even Asia. Okay. So Helix Kitten, a lot of them like cat names because there are security tools that are named cat, right? And then you have North Korea, US, there are quite a few, right? Equation Group is one of them, and you would see all over, right? Latin America, I didn't look, there were a few from Brazil, Argentina. So you see, even in Mexico, you see some APT or groups that are attacking from the area. And if you ever look at live attack map, you would see that, right? So advanced persistent threat is growing and it's always changing, right? Groups are expanding, servers are adding. In the generic attack, a lot of the times you would see they perform denial of service or distributed denial of service. So the difference between DOS and DDoS, distributed denial of services use many systems to attack at once. And DOS use system to system. So it would be one attacker, one target, right? Normally, we would see more distributed denial of service more often because they would be taking over some of the bots or the system that has been infected, and they would use those systems. Could be, you know, someone that you know that would have those kind of computer that would run services in the back because they had clicked the wrong link. And simply denial of service, take down the resource, right? If it's a web server, it no longer can serve web pages. If it is a file server, it can no longer communicate and allow the user to download. So it exhausts the resources based on the request and the response that's generated. Okay. So here's the cycle for APT. A lot of times they would start with an initial compromise. Some of this has to do with phishing to obtain information. Some of it has to do with social engineering using zero-day attack. Zero-day just simply capitalize on existing weaknesses on the system they want. So for example, if Microsoft is releasing the next Windows OS tomorrow, right? Up on the release of that, they already, the software already has vulnerability, so it's using that vulnerability on day 0. Okay. And then once they have gained some information through, this is very much with the recon, getting the email, letting people clicking on the link. After that, they would get into escalation of privilege, accessing backdoor, having to enter the system somehow. So once they enter, they would move into more of the power user or the super user group. Okay. And once they have higher privilege, they would collect all the information from within, because you have to move from one segment to the next. And a lot of the times critical systems are pretty well protected through firewalls, making sure that it's not detecting. So they have to make sure that they gain more information. And so this is why a more advanced attack would take months, okay, sometimes years. So they would do the initial recon here, and that would take months. Once they're in, sometime, you know, even the attack itself is only a certain amount of time, right? Like we talked about Caesar Palace being attacked at a certain amount of time, but they have been inside for a long time. So in order to really perform that attack and take down the entire network, multiple network that's belong to that company at once, they have to be able to study what's on the inside. Like I said, a smart attacker is the one that does homework, right? And then move throughout the network and system. So they would harvest data, because data is money. Stay in it as long as they can. And then once they complete the mission, right, a lot of the time they delete traces. But sometimes, you know, they would leave information, so, and then sell the data or exchange data. So I took this from one of the website and the textbook, so you can see, right, the specific procedure for advanced persistent threat. Any question? As you know that this is a course in itself, so we're going to try to condense everything. So how can we combat this, right? Defense in depth, layered security, okay? Sorry. We need to deeply analyze, so you have to take a look at the logs of what had happened, because it records all the events that happened to your system. And then you have to look for specific activities from the log, looking at the network traffic, what is legitimate and what is an attack traffic. And then in order to mitigate it, you have to close the gap in security. That means that we have to do better in preventative measure. Okay, teaching the people not to click things, making sure that security practices are in place, updating rules, updating our system software, close out vulnerabilities, all of the things that we talked about with defense in depth. right? And then this is also a vector, right? Because the weakest link is the human. Okay. As they say, as the technology evolves more, right, we adapt to it, but we have to make sure that we close out the issue with human vector insecurity. Any question? Okay. So describe the role of the state actors in APT, Advanced Persistent Threat. State actors are often sponsored by a nation or a state government. They have specific targets such as companies, government, agencies, organizations. Successful attacks allow unauthorized access or allowing the APTs the ability to infiltrate significant amount of data. And data can be bought or exchanged via different channels. So they might infiltrate a system to obtain customer data, or sometimes design, or sometimes, analytics data for weapons, different things. And for the criminal syndicates, the majority of the time, the cybercrime that happens in the criminal area is the intention is to gain money for financial gain. Even when you're looking at identity theft via phishing, right, financially gain. Session hijack to obtain someone's transaction or a batch of transaction, right? Like bank transferring money to another bank, high amount type of transfer. I'm talking millions of dollars, right? Could be business to business. That's also financially driven. And in this area, you would see that they would commit criminal activities. A lot of the time discussions are held or posted in an encrypted manner, meaning that they would use tools and applications so that way plain text is not being seen. There was a cloud company that has posted for a group that the US government felt like it was not, it should not be, right? And they said that because they are a customer and they're using encrypted communication, so we would not know if they're, planning any kind of terrorism form of activities or not. So sure enough, months later, right, that cloud company was attacked by Anonymous because they wanted to reveal that, all the things about that particular group and that cloud company, right? So there are a lot of like political base driven activities that's happening too. And Anonymous is notorious for doing that kind of stuff, right? So the motivation we talked about is more of like a monetary gain for many of these incidents. And sometimes that could be distributing ransomware, lockdown people's system and data, or organization type of critical infrastructure, so that way they can have a ransom, right? From thousands of dollars to millions of dollars, it depends. And the majority of the time, even when the ransom is paid, right, they would only get some of it back. And then in the case that if they do get their data back, right, their system's already been jeopardized. So we have to go back and look at how we would not have that same problem down the line. The majority of the ransom comes from email. Okay. Embedded links in emails is the area that we always have to control. So criminal syndicates is located on page 3 at the top. I'm going to switch real quick. I'm going to sidetrack a little bit. I wanted to show you some relevant stuff. This is the materials I built for high school workshop. But, you know, so when we say attack, and some of you have me for ethical hacking, you've probably seen these faces already, but I just want to walk you through so you have a better understanding. I know that Security Plus sometimes asks about it. So the first phase is recon, right? Reconnaissance is one of the most important area because it's going to help you determine if you are a pen tester, right? Or from a perspective of the attacker, it will help them determine what kind of tools they're going to be using, what is the scope of the attack, how big or small the attack's going to be, the amount of effort that they're going to need. So they can use it as planning information and really have a projection of the timeline, the resource, and what kind of things that they need, you know, before they actually performing the attack. So with that is just gathering information, getting information about the system, the security appliances that they have in the organization, any kind of automation. Sorry, I switched. And then to be able to understand more of the network. Now, once all of that is set up, and you have to know that even as a pen tester, when you do a blinded assessment, that means that you don't know anything about the system that the company has or the type of roadblocks that you're going to run into, and you have a certain amount of time to do it, you have to do a lot more homework, right, around it. Because if they don't share that information with you, you have to perform from a perspective of an attacker not knowing much. So you have to do as much as you can to gather that information. And sometimes even with gathering information and you thought that you could enter and you can't, right? You move one step forward, you might be 2 steps back. And that's normal in the game, right? So with this, we have to be not frustrated and sometimes you use a tool and it doesn't work. It works for other companies and other systems, but it doesn't work for a certain case. But once they establish the knowledge and they have all the toolkit that they need, right, and all the things that the resources that they need, they would do the exploitation. And that's normally start with intrusion, doing injection, man in the middle, right, denial of service. There are many different things, or even the physical attack, dropping media so get people to install malware, stuff like that. Okay. So the combat of this is, yes, we have to do defense in depth again, updating your appliances to security policies and rules, making sure that people are aware that don't plug in the USB, disable the USB ports. Many school districts, they do that, right? And then in the intrusion area, they would do persistence, meaning that I would escalate my privilege and be able to access things at a higher permission. Okay. Close out your ports, monitor your logs, looking at your network activities. This seems simple, but you'd be surprised, right? There are a lot of things that we open up so that way our service would work, but they would capitalize on that. And monitoring your network, if you have a security management system, you got to make sure that you have it checked for behavior, right? Or end response. Okay, this is a little small, but as you've seen in similar to APT, they're going to move lateral, establish persistent, so they maintain and stay inside. So that means that you need to control what's coming from the outside and then removing the ports and the services that's on the inside that you don't need. Okay. Once they are deep inside, they would exploit and collect. There's different exploitation kit for different things. Application, we use a different exploitation kit, right? If you are looking at collecting data from a wireless network, you use different tools and different kits. And then the majority of the time, they would leave a way to re-enter the system. Some of that is straight through scripting. Some of it could simply be, having a user account that they can access without being monitored. And it tends to be in the development area because it's harder to detect with the application in development. So logs is all that we need for that, right? And then following the rules to make sure, and all of this seems repetitive and redundant and all of that, right? But we can never close 100% in the gap. So exploitation kit changes all the time, right? The intention for exploitation kit, whenever that you see exploitation kit, your EK, right, is referred to as the industry, is simply this. This is what it does. It's established some kind of communication with another system from the outside, normally hosted by the group or the attacker, right? I would have a server set up and I would make sure that I funnel all the data and all the details from the victim or the targeted systems to my system. That's the whole game, right? And then redirect the user to something that they don't know I'm using exploitation kit or using another system to collect their data. So normally you would see redirection and it's normally the website or whatever that they're using. Very simple. Okay. And so the user won't even notice it once. Now with that, we would look into the vulnerability that we had collected and capitalize on it. So the exploitation kit, the tools that's made for this kit, group of tools, would utilize the vulnerability and exploit it. So if it's an application, it's a weakness in that application. If it's a network, it's a protocol for that network. If it's wireless, normally it's encryption or the protocol, right? And then they would infect. And so in the case where if you're looking at things like Metasploit and some of the EKs out there, this is basically the procedures that would be used for those kits. So there would be many different kits and you would find like variations of them for different purpose. Okay. So now coming back here, then let's talk about some of the things that would be used with malware, right? So malware, they're basically malicious code or software that would cause some kind of damage to your system. And that's by definition is the malware. The virus, you would need human intervention. Virus normally needs you to bring it to where it needs to go, like a download. Okay, an executable that you execute or run. The worms, it is self-replicating. It doesn't need human intervention to go from one system to the next. They are a lot more dangerous. So once they are in the network, they would multiply very fast. So if your system is infected with the virus, the best thing to do is to disconnect. Quarantine, right? Most antivirus software is about 50 to 60% effective. As you know, that we only know about 60 or less, 50% of definition and behavior of virus in the wild, hence the internet. So we would assume that, yeah, it is about 60% safe. Okay. Logic bomb, simply it requires some kind of logic. It would execute based on response. For example, the program can be created with if-else statement. If the user opens a certain application 10 times, this will execute. Or, right, something else. Okay. Backdoor, another way to access the system normally is a developer access, and it would bypass your normal authentication method. So it's directly accessing, the application or the system itself. Trojan horse, it's usually something hides within it. It masquerades your malicious code. So they look benevolent, but they're not, right? Remote access Trojan, this is known as rat, and there's many different rat out there. I'm pretty sure if you look them up, you will find variation of them. This is normally what attacker prefer to use with exploitation kit to take control of your system, including making bots for the distributed denial of service, is the rat. Ransomware, we already know that this is a way to lock, right, by encryption, lock the data, lock the system, and demand money. But there are variation of ransomware that doesn't use encryption. It's just a way that they can lock the system, but encryption is one of the better way. Keylogger, recording keystroke, normally used with phishing. Spyware, watching your system activity. I think a lot of the sites that store your cookies use spyware anyway, legally. And you accept that term when you visit their website, right? Because that's how they get your data. Like what search pattern you have, what you are looking for. If you're searching for shoes, they will advertise shoes. So that's spyware mechanism. And that plays into the adware now. Your bots are simply software robots. This is a set of codes that is used to access the resource of your system. Normally connection, RAM, processor, and storage, your drives. Botnets are simply a group of bots. Bot herders are, they would use manageable bots. So they would have management system that control these bots from all over the world. Rootkits, root level, kernel access, a lot harder to fix. Low level, normally, right? Because it uses RAM and it uses hook processes. So they understand how to work the OS real well and build out the rootkits. Okay. All right, so let's go through. So virus, the difference between the virus and the worm is the worm self-propagate, right? The virus needs human intervention. They're both malicious codes, or they're part of malware. So virus attach itself to the host application through the human intervention. You have to execute the code. So it might come in from email, right? They would social engineer and get you to open the email and download, right? Sometimes that could be something that's current and new in the media. The worm itself propagates, so it does not need the user assistance or the interaction. So through the water hole or those malicious website, you would see that the worm is self-downloading. So as soon as the user visit that website, right, the website is developed so that it automatically downloads in the back. And once it gets into that system, it would cross, into other areas of the network. And for your logic bomb, it is embedded code in the application to execute the response to an event. So in order to return to the system, like I said, you would use backdoor. But backdoor is just a way to bypass the normal authentication. Developers would use this level of access to go back and modify some of their code or test some area that might be buggy. And most companies now have their developers trained in security, so that doesn't happen anymore, right? We want to make sure that everybody that's logged in get logged. We record and be accountable for the events, even if the developers access. So I'm going to tell you the story about Yahoo from a long time ago. There was a developer for Yahoo. When Yahoo was one of the companies that had remote developers for a long time, right? Many years, for 10 years. And then the new CEO came and she said, everybody has to come back to the office. So during the remote time, there was a developer that logged in and, he gets paid by the job and also the hour, but he had contracted out to another developer in another country for a minimal amount. So for example, if he was getting paid $28 an hour, he would pay someone a very small fraction of that, a few dollars an hour. But he would spend his whole entire time watching cat videos, right? The cat video famous case. And for many months, the companies just let it go by because nobody was looking into it. And then one day they were auditing their network and they had found an IP address that was coming from China that would log in and upload all the code into their testing development system. And everything was fine. There was nothing malicious. So the IT team started to investigate. And periodically, just about that same time at the end of the week, right, that's when his code was due. This developer from China logged in and submitted the code. And then they started tracking, right? And they start looking into authentication. So they pinpoint which developer that was, right, communicating from China IP. And so they found out this guy and they fired him. But at the same time, right, when all of this blew up years ago, the journalists interview him and he watched thousands of hours of cat videos when that happens. So capitalizing company's dollar, doing minimal amount of work, contracted out, he outsourced it. But the downfall is that the IP coming from China. So you can see everything on the network, right? Okay. So this is an insider problem as well. Okay. So bypassing authentication sometimes is there, but we should not allow that, right? No backdoor. So the purpose of ransomware is to deliver encryption, locking the user data so it's not accessible to the user, asking for a ransom, a certain amount of money, and sometimes not able to unlock the data after pay. Companies are kind of 50-50 on that, right? Some organization, they will pay, some will pay partial, some will pay all, and then there's some organization that won't pay. And success and failure in that is about 50% also, right? That's just random chance. And then some company relies on insurance to pay for their data to be rebuilt. So imagine, right? How much is your data worth? Well, how much is it to rebuild the data? So if your customer data from 5 years ago, right, you have to go back and how many records of data. So each record might be worth sometimes $25, sometimes thousands of dollars. It depends on the type of record, right? And the history for that record. So if you're looking at patient data, all the diagnosis, the prescription, the x-ray, all of that information. And what if that person is no longer alive, right? But you still have to retain that information because insurance still require that data for payment purposes, for other things. So, it varies with the worth of data in the organization. So normally you see ransomware as a Trojan, right? It comes in as something else that looks very nice and simple. Let me move this to the next page. Any questions? Oops. So the purpose of spyware is to monitor the activities on the computer. A lot of the time the user's activity, it could be with the applications. And spyware comes in different, I want to say different use. Did you know that your smart devices have spyware, right? And you allowed it. a lot of your browser have the mechanism to look at your search pattern and use that data and use it for advertising or marketing purposes. Because, you know, free stuff, they have to make sure that they maintain the server and the system. So they want to take the data in exchange for that, right? Facebook got in a lot of trouble for that a while ago with voting data and so on. There's different regulation for privacy, and depending on the state and the government or the nation that you're in. So just know that we talked about botnets, group of robots, and this is used to look for information on the web, use resources, or launching attacks. They could be in different areas. You know, bots like sending out links for marketing purposes. And in order to mass market, a lot of times company will pay these for the bot company to generate that. And it's simply a set of servers that would launch, right? These things go through all the YouTube channel and plugging in the comments. You've seen those, right? I think they're doing a better job at blocking those. You can report them and they get blocked. But bots can be used for attack, to launch attack. And not all virus have files. There are fileless virus. And the technique that they would use is memory code injection that writes directly to RAM. You know that all application uses RAM, correct? Now, they also use your cache for your processor. So there's processor requirement and storage for the processor. They also use RAM requirement and also your permanent storage, which is your SSD or your HDD. So memory code injection is something that you would see with fileless servers. So it directly store onto the storage itself. This is also script-based, so it's very automated. And for Windows environment, anytime that you have a malware or anything, a software that's installed, your registry is modified, right? When you install or uninstall software, your Windows registry keeps track. When you install hardware, your registry also keeps track. This is a way that your Windows OS keeps inventory of what resource it's using with the hardware and what is using those resources, which is the software. Software uses hardware. So Windows registry keeps track of that. And because virus or malware in general, right, is their code, their program applications. So it also updates. But the window registry area, it changes the key value in certain areas. And then often that they are embedded in other files. So in a way, fileless server does use the same mechanism as Trojan that is encompasses in some areas, some fileless server virus. Any question? So how can you tell if you're being attacked or not? Extra network traffic, especially denial of service, you're going to have a flood, right? And it's exactly that, just lots of traffic at once. So that should raise a flag. When you have losing data, right? You have data loss, data exfiltration. And how can we tell? Sometimes that can come from email. Sometimes that can come from system chat messages, different things. But when data is being exchanged or being in motion, right? Email, we can probably block and go through the control process with data loss prevention, where we set up the rules. The data doesn't just get sent out without authorization or approval. When there's a lot of encrypted traffic, because they don't want you to see. Attackers want their stuff to be as stealth as possible. If we can encrypt traffic to prevent them from seeing, they can do the same to us. So when you see a lot of encryption encrypted based activity, question that. Traffic from specific IP addresses from a certain source and it's being sent. So the source and the destination focus on the IP address. So if the security people are monitoring their network traffic as they should, right? There should be a list of IP addresses that would normally be used for the baseline. So if things that are, that's not in the baseline, then we would question that. Doesn't necessarily mean that we would blacklist it, but we would check it, right? And then if there's ongoing spam and phishing, spam for phishing or even phishing activity, you should question that too. Like it's keep coming into your mail server, right? Your users are keep getting text messages and they report those things. Because phishing is the beginning sign of a targeted attack, for sure. So social engineering is the human piece in this, right? So social engineering really play with trust and the level of trust. Because once we trust someone, we would devote information and or even give them access, right? So the common technique is what they would use flattery or even conning. Sometimes blackmailing, but conning, a form of flattery. Sometimes they would use the position of authority, calling from Dell support team, IRS, right? Law enforcement agency. And the pretexting piece in the social engineering is the third bullet. Encourage someone to do something risky. So phishing and pretexting, they always go together. Pretexting is just a way to get someone to do something. The tactic in sales, sometimes they pressure you to make a purchase within 5 minutes. That's also a form of pretext. So they would do the same thing for phishing, right? Click this link now within the next 30 seconds so you can win $100,000 or whatnot. Pretexting also is a way to encourage someone to give out sensitive information. Internal organizational operation with executives. And you see that for spear phishing. And impersonation falls under social engineering. And sometimes you would see phishing that require impersonation, right? You get the phone call, they're calling from IRS, that's impersonation. For the system impersonation, they spoof the address, the IP address, the public IP. So in social engineering, they could impersonate someone or something that could be trusted. If it's external, like the IRS agency, if it's internal, it might be someone from the IT team or someone from the inside. Tailgating or following authorized personnel, and this is common for physical attack, is to stay near the door, wait for someone to enter, follow them inside without having a badge or physical access. Hello? And for many people, sometimes they don't, if they don't care, they don't pay attention, they let those people in. And if they're trained or they care, right, they would stop those people from entering the building through the following process. You might hear the term shadow IT. I didn't mention this earlier. It's just unauthorized system or application in the organization, like a rogue system. And there's way to detect it, right? If you manage an inventory of your system and addresses, you should know which one belongs to your system. Okay. And if the user are using systems that are not approved. So for example, when you guys configure the wireless network, let's say that I plug one of my router into their network, the IDS should send alarm all over the place, right? So I might find a port inside the building and I would plug my wireless router in there so it would have internet connection. It would have a way to send out traffic and receiving traffic. Well, if they are controlling the ports properly, right, the intrusion detection system would show up. But sometimes you would see shadow IT non-approved system popping up. Like they would bring personal system from home without authorized access and connect it to the network in a way where, like replacing the desktop at my work system. And so that way I can have more privilege locally on that system. I can install things, and that's a big no-no, right? We don't allow that because that can escalate to insider threat issue. Then looking over someone's shoulder, that's very common too. Hoax, those fake things to scare people, like, oh, you have 1,000 virus on this computer, click here to install this, but not a really good application for you. It might be spyware or something that you don't need. And then dumpster diving, typo squatting, these are some of the things that you often see also in the attack area, physical attack. Make sure we shred all the papers, 2 pieces, because even if you use a vertical shredder, sometimes they can piece it back. Dumpster diving is an art from the 70s and it's still being used. When you throw away your storage, right, make sure we physically damage them, burn, punch holes, things like that. We don't just throw them away because data can be retrievable. And then type swatting is URL hijacking. This is the way that they can use what's in the URL and be able to put in some information for malicious purposes. Sometimes query in the URL. So Waterhole, I mentioned this earlier. These are just websites that might be infected, or they would use those websites to infect your system. And sometimes they are websites that people demand, right? Or similar to those. So in the next question, it would ask you, what occurs in a waterhole? So in the attempts of discovering websites, people are likely to visit waterholes or infected websites. They could be embedded with malware, like they would have worms that could spread quickly, or they would entice the people to download something or access something. So that click on something. And are they doing anything to shutting down these servers? There are thousands of them, right? More than 9 million websites in the world. It's hosted everywhere. So if you look at how are they monitoring these, right? I think your browser is doing a better job now than it was before in looking at safety. in security and privacy, right? If you turn on that mode, it will tell you what website is safe to visit and what is not, usually just referring to HTTPS versus HTTP. Sometime if there's a threat in the content, right? For example, if you visit a security tool website and if it sees it at like Metasploit, your system or your security software might notify you saying that, oh, that website is not safe. So I think we're doing a better job at informing the user to make the right decision as far as browsing the internet. But you cannot rely on those things 100%, right? Because remember, threats is only effective, is known by about 50%. This is why security is always in demand. So for the elicitation technique for the attacker is to really focus on the target and encourage conversation. So they would give the attention to the target. And you would often see reflective questioning would repeat the statements to encourage more details in the answer. So for someone to call the victim, right, they would use these techniques to get more information out of the victim. And then they would use false statement. So you would see more prevalent things like deepfake down the line. I think deepfake it's gonna probably impact us in America a lot more down the line. Because the phishing tactics, I think people are more aware of it now. So deepfake is, even on a FaceTime deepfake, they can use AI mask type of images where it looks very real. It looks like an actual person talking to you. So they would use false statement, things like, my car broke down. I need you to sell me this much money. Here's the number, right? If you don't recognize the number, if you don't, even if sometimes it could be your family member, a lot of, like when I was in Asia, they were warning me about that, right? Like that's very common over there is the type of scam that they would do. And even if you communicate with them, you think they're real, they're not. So normally they ask for money or sensitive information. Hi. And then bracketing, just use the range of numbers to get someone to reveal the actual information. Kind of, just throw out some information out there, kind of close to it. Or sometimes it would be association and names. That's also a common technique to get people to trust. So I think the psychology piece on this, in social engineering is really important in security. You have to understand the human psychology to really capitalize on it, right? And then with that, we have to understand it to make sure that our people are protected. Any questions? So let me move this down, 15 and 16. Let's move this guy up. So in pretexting could include impersonation. So how can an attacker use pretext to obtain information? Just to really establish trust, ultimately, right? To build that trust with the victim. So they could use fictitious scenario or people in the conversation to make a request more believable. So if they know that you know someone, they would defer to that person all the time. I'm like so and so best friend. You must trust me. Right? I would never do anything to hurt you because I'm so and so friend. Something like that. So is that real? Probably not. So in that case, you need confirmation. Right? So let me hang up. I will call this person to confirm. So I think that confirmation in the process is going to help. And use secret texting and phishing because in order to get you to give sensitive data, you have to establish that trust. And phishing is just a technique to get sensitive information. So these two go together. Pretexting encourage you to commit to an activity, like clicking a link, entering your account information, resetting your password. Okay. Now the difference between whaling and spear phishing targeted a group. So for example, spear phishing, I've seen it happen here, target students, because they know that you might be looking for work. So you get emails, you can earn $1,000 a week, click this link to apply, right? And that link might be malicious. Whaling is spear phishing for executives. So basically it focuses on the executives as users or victims. So whaling targets executives like the CEO, CIO, COO, CFO, Chief Financial Officer, or higher management. And within that, they can also spearfish, right? Like, for example, they would know a group of executives that would normally be in a golf club or a certain type of club, and then they would send a flyer and have them register for a golf event, and they just click that, right? I've seen it all. Golf events, company festival, advertisement within the company, things like that. And spear phishing focuses on a specific group of victims. Phishing is voice phishing, that messages that you receive from law enforcement and IRS, those are vishing with the V. And so ultimately, what should we do? Right? As users and even specialists and administrator, start with the personal level, use security software, right? Anti-malware, at least it reduced the risk by about 50-60%. And we regularly updates it. So you can have it, live scan or running it in the back. And from the network level, we need to do this for our email system. And we need to filter content and block, right, data coming out with certain content, so many things. But malware in general, we can also look at file types, right? Behavior, definitions. So anti-malware needs to be on security system on email system as well. Anywhere that you have data in transit, safe, must have malware protection. On your file server, on your storage server. And then awareness is important, right? From an organizational standpoint, people need to know what a scam looks like, right? The reason why you know about the phishing scam is because maybe you watch social media videos or maybe you have read that somewhere, right? So companies need to find a way to share resources and train their user to be more aware. So my student recently works at a school district, and she's assisting another student to do a phishing campaign for Colton School District. guess how many people actually click on the actual link, right? So 2 days before payday, she had created a phishing email and sent it out to all the users saying that, their account for their pay has been needs update for password. 50% of the employees click, staff, faculty, all, right? 50% click on the link and fill out the information. So as they click submit, it actually gives them a page that, you need to do this type of training. So you can actually test and see how many people within the company would do that. You can test it at home and see. That's more of a safer way until you get authorized to test with the company. And then educate the user about using systems safely. So some of these are long, you don't have to put verbatim, but if you want, you can. You can summarize. Oh, I forgot to mention credential harvesting. That's just to get username and password. A lot of it is for phishing or vishing purposes. So you'll log in. So there are different types of anti-malware. We would see signature-based. Traditionally, this is the only thing back then, right? Signature-based. So it would have signature files or data definitions that define the pattern of the malware. Because based on the known malware, remember the signature would defer to the known type. So the quarantine malware it would quarantine malware by containing it, putting it in somewhere that it's not active again. Usually, a lot of the malwares, almost all malware affect system files. So if you delete the malware and its file, it would corrupt your system. So many times that it would quarantine it so that way it's not active. Then heuristic-based definition, this is to detect based on previously known behavior or some type of exploits. These don't have signatures. So this will be good for your live system, your live environment. And when it checks, it also checks for your file integrity to see if in your system files, things have been modified, usually by hash calculation, matching up the hash of the original file to something that was been recently modified or accessed. And then your anti or your AV also look at data execution prevention. This is your DEP. It would prevent codes from executing memory regions. Remember, the applications require memory, so there are memory regions that are used for non-executable. So DEP prevent the code execution from non-executable memory region. So RAM is broken up into different region. There's region that would be accessible with execution or applications and software that would have processes for execution. And then there are region that simply is a way to have addresses that would reference data possible. So I think the antivirus or the anti-malware system or the software now is a lot more advanced than what you've seen maybe 5 or even 10 years ago. And every time that you use it, it normally starts with an update. right? If you ever open your antivirus or your anti-malware, and you should always use it on anything that's computing, tablets, smartphones, right? Computer, laptop. And the more frequent you use the system to access the internet, download and access files, or visit websites, the more often you need to update and scan. Back in the day when I first started working, companies would release new definition midweek, okay? And then we would update the following day. So you often see that, we would wait half of a week or a week to go through and run the updates. But now they update it frequently. So as soon as, and then there are ways to report malware. So if something is unknown, you can submit it to some of the antivirus, anti-malware companies, and also there are websites that are dedicated for that. It's a better way for the community to share malicious code that could impact their system or that impact their system. So the principle that would enhance social engineering, we mentioned that, they might have more authority, impersonation, and a lot of this to build trust. Social engineering is 100% trust related. Intimidation, bullying techniques, or sometimes pressuring, like act now, 30 seconds. Consensus, groupthink, or influenced by others. So everybody is doing it. So just like how during COVID, everybody's getting toilet paper and everybody runs out, right? That's consensus. So sometimes pressuring someone by influence can be, and that's common with social media too. Scarcity, right? Take advantage of limited resource. You see this a lot. I know this is a little lengthy, but we still have some time, so. Any question? Sorry, I have a little bit more for that section. So let me move this because this one is kind of long to the next page. So where can let's finish 23. And then familiarity is what's familiar to the user or the victim. So that way it would encourage them to commit a similar action. You say, oh, you've done this before. You can do it. Just do it one more time. Trust building relationship. And that will be some of the principle that social engineering tactics would use. Any question? So how can I know if my software is vulnerable, right? Like the operating system I'm using, or the application that I have installed on my smart devices. So by regulation, software companies, and by practice too, they document vulnerabilities that are known. And sometimes updates will close most of it, sometimes not. But this is known as you can find common vulnerability database, or it's known as CVEs. And some of them depending on the documentation or the database or the inventory of the common vulnerability, if it's through the vendor, they would have a way to ID that vulnerability, and it would state the details of that vulnerability. So let me take you here real quick and then we'll come back. So this is Microsoft, right? As you know that the majority of the population in the world use Microsoft product for organization. So here we can see that there's Edge, which is the browser that's Chrome based. And then there are some other type of application, for example, Visual Studio, and then other areas. So on the right-hand side, right, the impact, it will tell you. So for example, if I'm looking at March 17, 2022, and you can see some newer release. This is just a link that I obtained for the prior class. You can find some information. Older stuff will still impact us if you haven't updated, right? And this is elevation of privilege. Someone can get into higher level access if this particular area of Edge is not closed, right? If we haven't updated it. And you can look at the release information. So if you click on it, it would list the CVE's value. So I just picked the top one and I click on release information. So there are different ID. So you would see there's March 22, 14, 2024, and then March 7. So even with that, since 2022, 2 years later, you still see how it's impacted? So a lot of these things don't go away instantly, right? Even over time, the risk might be reduced or not. Some, maybe it's lessened, but sometimes it doesn't reduce at all. Okay, so look through that. And then what you're going to do is you are going to answer the questions. If there is an attack vector type, look into attack vector. How complex is it? Would that be listed? In the release note. So you can pick I've just picked the top one where it says Microsoft Edge. And then click on the CVE. Once you get to the release node, you can click on the CVE. So for this one, if I install Edge on Android, it would tell me right here, it has all the metrics for you already. It's an 8. So if you expand the attack or click the attack vector, it will tell you. So where was I? So I was here, right? I was on the Microsoft website. I went to the link. I click on the link and then I selected, sorry, let me get rid of my Zoom. I went to here and I just selected this by clicking the release node. And then inside the release note, if you start looking at the CVEs, let's say that I click on February 29th. That's pretty recent. I can click the CVEs because it's a security vulnerability. And if you go down, it breaks down to attack vector. And how complex is it? You can summarize this. You don't have to put everything. And then it even gives it a score. So if it is highly impacted, you would see that the score is higher. So when you're looking into closing out vulnerability, we have to look at these CVEs. And then, you know, sometimes Microsoft will say, oh, run this update. It will close out some of the issue. And sometimes there's no fix yet. Okay. So expand each of the arrow section and you'll be able to answer that question, depending on which one you pick. So the purpose of this exercise is to show you how you can find, right, vulnerability for Microsoft, because that's very popular. And then, you know, how impactful is it to your system? Then for part C of number 24, you would click on CVSS. This is another resource that you can use. So the metrics that you see, it entails base, threat, environment, and supplemental. Okay, so look at that website and answer the next few questions. So based on the metrics, it gives you the score, right? Like 8 or a temporary 3 or whatnot. Then you would compare that with first.org to see if based on that, is it going to be the accurate value? Because every company, they try to use industry recommended practice in calculating the score. So here it tells you these four. So many of you aspire to be the analyst. Guess what you're working with? Metrics and logs and vulnerability, right? How exciting. But this is just a beginning resource. So I'm showing you the resource that you need. You need to take a look at these resources and see how that can be applied to your professional position. Okay. So here it gives you the breakdown of everything. How can they measure how complex is the attack? All the details. So these are the matrix that's already been built. So you would just apply it. So is 8 a high, a low, a medium? And then they also have user interaction. So I break this down a little bit more in my 41A class where this is all calculated.
Basically, I have 2.1.1 attack vector. That's where it says to go. To figure out
Yes.
24, 20.
Yeah. So when you wrote down the attack vector information in the other one, you can go to that section and look at how that was calculated. Any question? Yes.
Yeah.
Did you answer A and B? Where's A and B?
This is the answer.
Okay. No, the CVSS is not the answer for A. You have to pick the one, the actual CVE. So go back to the Microsoft website, click on the link on the right. And then, yeah, click on that one. And then you have to expand and read all of that. So expand the attack vector. And it tells you what that is, but your base score is an 8-bit. So you need to put down your base score and your attack vector information. So when we look at this website, right, and you select your release note and look at the CVE, at the top, it tells you, right, this CVSS, this is a value. Understand? And then your matrix is the breakdown of the section score. So how do they accumulate a certain score is through the metrics as given below. So it tells you here that the attack vector is the network, the value. Look at the value on the right. The attack complexity is low, but the matrix is 8, right? So that means that it's coming in from the network, hence the browser. It's simple, right? And how complex is it? It's low. So put those down for 24. And then you can go down and expand further if you need. Now, if it's low and if it's network, we're going to come back to the other website. And it tells you on the question, it says, visit this, see section 7.4 to determine the value of that. Let me see if they update. Yeah, so go down. You see, each of these are the section 2.15, right? Search for 7.4, go all the way down. You can do Control F and then 7.4. Maybe it doesn't take. Yeah. Thank you. But 7 is going to give me a lot of 7s. Yeah, so here's the vector string. Qualitative severity. So you can rank it low, medium, or high. And so earlier we saw the matrix, it says 8, right? The CVSS score, remember at the top, that score really tells you which level that is. Is it high, medium, or low? Right here in 6. And then the vector string area, the base score, they tell you what number that is. So the attack vector. So the example that you see here, right? It's very similar to ours. Attack vector is network. Low, right? Attack requirements, none, and high. So how do they calculate that? Right? They plug in each of the score from each area. So I know that this might be really complex right now, right? Just when you look at the CVSS on the Microsoft website, put down that value and then use that value, go back to section 6 and determine whether it is low, medium, or high. That's good enough for me for now. Okay. And then we'll save some for the analyst class later. But know that this gives you the industry recommended rating scales, and you can always refer to this for any software CVE. And there's also a NIST calculator that's out there. You can plug it in and calculate the score. analysts, and also for IT management. You have to know these things, metrics and things. Question?
I,
Section 6?
yeah, here,
Okay, so what was the score did you put down? Did you put down the score for CBSS? 8 is the metrics. Go back to the other website right here. No, the other one, sorry. Scroll up. Yeah, so it tells you right there.
that's the score.
It's a 7.
7.
So a 7 would be in the range of high, low, high. It's beginning of high. Okay. Okay. Let me see if this is still available. So when you do incident response, a lot of the times you're dealing with bug bounty in the advanced area, and that can come from application to web application to system to database and other things. Okay. If you want to report an issue, you can click on this and you can send Microsoft information about their bug in their system or their application. You can do the update guide, but this is what we're interested in, is the bounty program. So if you ever are interested in finding bugs for Microsoft, you can go through this section. It talks about the process, and there are tons of things that you can work with. Google has one. Actually, one of my students in my CIS27 forensic last semester won an award for Google Bug Hunt through learning some of the technique in my class, and he sent me an email, and I was so surprised. And he did really well. He actually found 2 for Google. So Microsoft governs a lot of area, including Xbox, and a lot of, cloud-based environment and applications. So you can see some of us have a lot of money that's attached to it. So a lot of the professional bug bounty people, they do this for a living, and when they submit it and it's legitimate, they get a check, right? I saw a documentary a while back. I think it was on one of the cable channel. I don't know if it's on Netflix or not, but they were talking about like this area in some cases can be very dangerous. But, and that could be a propaganda. So, it's just, hearsay. But this is a really good way to really understand, and it ties development and application design with security. Because I have a lot of students that are interested in both, right? And they always ask me, oh, how can I get a computer science degree and do this instead of just getting the IT degree or the security degree? And I said, this is the proper area, is, you can, if you really want to do this as a security professional, you can be a bug bounty person. And so there you go, right? And you can find other vendor. Any question? Okay, so just briefly describe some of the things that you saw as vulnerability and the criteria for security impact for the program. You can pick a program of choice. So if you come back to this, for example, mitigation bypass bounty for defense, that will be probably interesting. Look at the program information here. And then, and then they also have what would be considered eligible when you submit. So this is the criteria. Okay. Imagine you just work all year for $100,000, right? I mean, that's pre-tax, but Still not bad, one per year, that's good enough salary, I think. But you have to consistently work, right? So. All right, let me stop recording.